Jaime deBlanc-Knowles, who holds an MA in Creative Writing from the University of Texas at Austin. Her work has been published in Post Road and Meridian, and she's been the recipient of a MacDowell Fellowship and a Lighthouse Works Fellowship. She currently teaches creative writing workshops through UT Informal Classes, The Writing Barn, and Fresh Ink. Please welcome Jaime deBlanc-Knowles.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to read the first half of a short story called Bargain Spell. And just for a little context, I'm in a writing group that meets on Tuesday nights. And every week a different member brings the writing prompt. And the week I started writing this story, the prompts were all about fairy tales. In a small hamlet on the outskirts of the kingdom, there lived a boy without a voice. He could hear it inside of himself, echoing in his mind. But when he opened his mouth, all that came out were ice crystals. In his presence, people felt an awful chill and drew away. And so the boy lived in a circle of solitude, surrounded by others, but always at a distance. One day, the boy worked up the courage to go see the witch who lived on the edge of the village. He'd seen her from afar, riding her bicycle with its wide handlebars, but she never seemed to him quite what a witch should be. She wore pointy-edged glasses with green rims and favored gold earrings that brushed the tops of her shoulders. Shivering slightly, he stepped up to her cottage door and knocked 3 times. After a long moment, the door jerked open, and the witch peered out into the afternoon sunlight. He was surprised to find, up close, that she wasn't as old as he thought she was. There were a few lines around her eyes, but her hair was blonde and wavy, with only a few streaks of gray. She looked him over. "And who are you?" she asked, in the voice of someone who'd realized they weren't looking at a paying customer. The boy opened his mouth and fogged her glasses with frost. "Well," the witch removed her green-rimmed glasses and examined them, front and back. "Isn't that interesting?" She peered at him. "Can't you speak?" He pressed his lips together and shook his head. She still hadn't opened the door any wider than her shoulders. The witch was a practical woman, and she knew what she needed today was to sell a few more bottles of love potion, and perhaps a hex or 2, just to make ends meet. She chewed on the inside of her cheek. On the other hand, she had no other appointments this afternoon, and the hours until evening promised to stretch quiet and long. She opened her door wider. "Come in," she said. The cottage was just one room, with a narrow little bed wedged into the corner under the window. Most of the floor space was taken up by a scarred wooden table, where the witch compiled her potions. The boy looked up at the assortment of strange items hanging from the ceiling. But before he could look for too long, the witch pulled him by his shoulders and made him face her. "Open your mouth," she said. "I want to see what's down your throat." The boy opened his mouth and the witch moved closer, shivering in the breeze that drifted out from between his teeth. She stared down his dark throat and into the mysteries of his belly. There was something floating down there, pale and massive and ridged with shadows. "An iceberg," she said softly. Her teeth were chattering. Standing this close to the boy was not a pleasant experience. She'd seen him from afar, she realized now, when he was out working in the fields. The other children kept their distance from him, but she'd always thought it was because of his dark hair, his skin that marked him as a foreigner. "Now how did that get him there?" she asked him. The boy closed his mouth and shook his head. He did not remember ever anything like an iceberg entering his body, but for as long as he could remember, he'd felt a cool heaviness in his middle. He pressed a hand against his belly. He wanted to ask the witch if she could help him, but when he tried to speak, all that came out was a wintry mist. The witch pursed her lips, which she carefully reddened each day with berry juice. "I don't suppose you have any money." The boy shook his head. He had nothing, not a mother or a father or a coin to call his own. The witch tapped a finger against her lips. Apart from the chill surrounding him, the boy seemed healthy enough. She tried to gauge his age. 11, maybe? She wasn't good with children and their ages. His pitch-black eyes followed her every movement and seemed to see farther than they should. She sat down on her rickety 3-legged stool and frowned. "Well, I don't know." She had never seen a case like his before. Truth be told, she was not so much in the line of healing people these days, She was more in the line of reading tarot cards and dispensing bogus potions. The love philter that was her main moneymaker was merely apple cider pepped up with an infusion of ginger. Now she had to struggle mightily to remember her old training. Let's see, you could swallow a drop of liquid fire. The boy's eyes grew huge. But that seems as likely to kill you as cure you, she said. Her eyes focused on the middle distance. I could give you a tea made of dragon's tails, although that's really more for indigestion. She pondered a while longer. Of course, she knew how she could solve his problem straight away. Esmeralda. But still, the witch hesitated. Esmeralda was her most precious possession, and she was not to be used lightly. The witch stared at the boy. There was nothing so very wrong with him. He looked well-fed and perfectly able to fend for himself. Still, she was struck by the look in his eyes, that of a prisoner who had spent long years reading books he couldn't discuss with anyone. Well, it couldn't hurt just to ask Esmeralda. The witch pushed herself to her feet and turned to her cupboard. On the top shelf, away from all the other spell ingredients, was a wide glass jar with holes punched in its top. Inside sat a little creature that looked something like a firefly. Its back end glowed a cool, mesmerizing green. The witch stood on tiptoe and took the jar down, holding it in front of her face. Esme, she said. Inside the jar, the creature batted its one heavily lashed eye. The witch hadn't used the firefly, except for that one time, almost a decade ago. One couldn't use a creature like Esme lightly. Still, the witch found it comforting to have a creature of such power in her possession. A backup plan, in case of emergency. Each day she fed Esme peach nectar, and lately she'd taken to chatting with her when she was lonely, which was most of the time. Gently, the witch unscrewed the top of the jar. She tilted it and shook Esmeralda out into her hand, where the firefly sat no bigger than a bottle cap. Her wings fluttered. Her wings fluttered. There we go. The witch thought of the first and only time she had called on Esme's aid, and her nerve endings tingled. It's a tricky case, Esme, the witch said. I'm sorry, guys, I'm getting mixed up. She thought of the one and only time she had called on Esme's aid, and her nerve endings tingled. Her fingers convulsed around the firefly, as if she wanted to cup her hands closed and put Esme back in her jar. The witch knew the rules. Esme could only be used 3 times in a witch's lifetime, which meant the witch could use her only twice more, or once if she decided to help the boy now. It's a tricky case, Esme, the witch said. Then she turned so that Esme could see the boy, his ripped shirt and his calloused hands. Esmeralda waved her antenna around like an orchestra conductor. The witch frowned. You can't be serious. Esme's antenna danced and dipped, insistent. With effort, the witch straightened her fingers and held out the firefly on her palm. Swallow, she told the boy. He stepped backwards and shook his head. Go on, boy. Do you want to get rid of the iceberg or not? Now that she had made up her mind to help him, she was in no mood for coddling. There was a long silence. Finally, with a shaky hand, the boy reached out and plucked Esme out of the witch's palm with his thumb and forefinger. And then slowly, very slowly, he put Esmeralda in his mouth and swallowed. A strange expression passed over his face, as if he'd just eaten a firecracker. What's happening, the witch said, leaning forward. How do you feel? The boy opened his mouth and expelled a flurry of snowflakes that were tinted acid green. The witch adjusted her glasses and peered at the boy's stomach, seeing through his flesh into the workings of his belly. There the iceberg sat, as majestic and forlorn as a tanker on the open sea, its sides slick and translucent. Esmeralda was perched on top of it, her delicate furred feelers resting on either side of its peak. Then Esme opened her wings, and green light poured out of her body, filling the boy's stomach with warm, steamy air. The boy made a helpless sound. Inside his stomach, the iceberg was melting. He felt a softness there that was strange, and yet distantly familiar. He remembered the touch of a woman's hand as it cupped the back of his head. A thin trickle, the color of liquefied spinach, ran out of the corner of his eye, slid down his cheek, and stained the front of his shirt. It's working, the witch said. Then she gripped her hands together. isn't it?" The boy didn't look so good. His skin had turned an ashy gray-green, and his stomach had begun pulsating, like he was having some kind of localized seizure. The witch grabbed his shoulders and gave him a little shake. "Speak, boy, what's happening?" The boy's lips parted and he began to cough. He hacked several times, and on his last heave he spat up Esme, who hurled out of his mouth and tumbled onto the gritty floor. Quickly, the witch scooped up the firefly and deposited her on the tabletop, where Esme began to fluff out her wings and groom her face. The boy collapsed on the ground. A strange sound came out of his mouth, like he was trying to draw in breath through a pinhole. The witch fell to her knees, her earrings jingling as she bent over his body. "Come on, boy," she whispered. "Stay with me." The boy closed his eyes, and then, without so much as a whimper, he ceased to breathe.